There's a moment when someone says something that would normally hook you, and this time it doesn't. Not because you stopped it, not because you tried harder. It just misses. The reaction is still there. You can feel it forming, but it doesn't complete itself the way it used to. You notice it the way you notice weather changing through a window. For years, certain things were automatic. A tone of voice, a question phrased a certain way, the feeling of being misunderstood or dismissed, or not taken seriously. The reaction would already be moving before you registered what happened. And then one day, it's still forming, but slower, like it's moving through something thicker than air. You're watching it happen instead of being inside it. At first, this feels wrong, not because the reaction was good, but because it was familiar. It was how you knew where you were. The reaction told you who you were dealing with, what was happening, what mattered. Without it firing the same way, there's a gap. Not emptiness, just gap. And in that gap, you don't know what to do. You might still say the same thing you would have said, but the feeling underneath it is different. There's less urgency, less certainty that this moment requires what you thought it required. You used to feel the need to correct, defend, clarify, or withdraw. Now those impulses are still present, but they don't have the same momentum. They arrive, and then they wait. This changes relationships in ways that are hard to name. People expect a certain response from you. They're used to a particular version of the exchange. When you don't give it to them, they notice. Not always consciously, but they feel it. Some people push harder. They escalate, trying to land the reaction they're used to getting. Others go quiet. The dynamic they relied on isn't functioning the way it did. And you're just standing there, not sure what you're supposed to be doing. You're not calm in the way people talk about being calm. You're not detached. You're present. But the machinery that used to interpret everything so quickly isn't running at full speed anymore. So you're seeing more, feeling more, but responding less. What's strange is that you don't feel more in control. Control implies effort. It implies managing something, steering it, keeping it in check. This isn't that. This is more like standing in a river that used to knock you over and realizing the current isn't as strong as you thought. Not because the river changed, but because something in how you're standing did. The identity you built around your reactions starts to feel less solid. You used to know who you were by how you responded, the things that bothered you, the things you couldn't let go. Those reactions were evidence, proof that something mattered, that you mattered. When they stop firing the same way, part of you wonders what's left. But what's left isn't nothing. It's just quieter. You're still here. You still have preferences, boundaries, feelings, but they're not as loud. They don't need to announce themselves the same way. You can feel something without needing to do something about it immediately. And that's disorienting, because for a long time, feeling and doing were the same thing. There's a version of this people talk about like it's freedom, like you've broken through something, and now you're on the other side. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels more like you've stepped into a room you didn't know was there, and now you're just standing in it, looking around. There's no triumph, no relief, just a different quality of attention. You start to notice how much energy used to go into reaction, not just the obvious ones, the subtle ones too. The small tightening when someone says something in a certain tone, the rush of heat when you feel ignored, the need to fix, explain, or make sure someone understands. All of that took something from you. And now, without trying, it's taking less. You don't miss it exactly, but you notice its absence the way you notice a sound stopping that you didn't realize was there. Silence is louder than you expected. People ask if you're okay more often now, because you're different in a way they can't name. You're not more distant, you're not checked out, but you're not performing presence the way you used to either. You're just there. And that makes people uncomfortable sometimes, because they're used to reading you through your reactions. When those reactions don't show up on cue, they don't know where they stand with you. You don't know either. You're figuring it out the same way they are. There are moments when the old reaction surges back, full force. Something hits just right, and suddenly you're back in the familiar pattern. The same intensity, the same certainty. And afterwards, you notice how much that took, how much it cost to be inside it again. Not because it's wrong, but because you felt what it's like when that's not running. And going back feels heavier now. This isn't about being better. It's not about evolving past something or transcending your patterns. It's just different. The pattern is still there. The wiring is still there. But the activation threshold has changed. It takes more to trip it. Or it trips, but doesn't catch the same way. You're not trying to make this happen. In fact, trying seems to interfere with it. The moments when the reaction doesn't complete itself are the moments when you weren't watching for it. When you were just present with what was happening, without a plan for what you were supposed to feel. And that's the part that can't be taught. You can't practice being present in a way that produces this, because the moment you're trying to produce it, you're back in the mechanism, back in effort, back in control. This happens on its own, or it doesn't happen. All you can do is notice when it does. Over time, you stop waiting for the old version of yourself to come back. You stop checking to see if you're still capable of those reactions. You know you are. They're still available, but they're not automatic anymore. And you start to realize that most of what you thought was just momentum. Patterns repeating because they'd repeated before. Reactions happening because they'd always happened. When the momentum slows, you see what's underneath it. Not some truer self, not some hidden core. Just space. Space where something else can happen. Or nothing. You don't know what to do with that space yet. Maybe you never will. But it's there now. And you can feel it. The people closest to you might not understand what's changed. They might say you're overthinking, or disconnected, or different in a way they don't like. And maybe they're right. Maybe you are different. But you can't go back to not noticing. Once you've felt the gap between what happens and what you do about it, you can't unfeel it. Once you've stood in that space, even for a moment, it stays with you. Not as a skill, not as progress, just as a fact. And now you're walking around in a world that still expects your reactions, still pulls for them, still tries to tell you what you should feel and when. But something in you is standing further back now, watching, not judging, not controlling, just watching. And maybe that's all this is. Not enlightenment, not healing, just watching. You don't feel different every day. Some days you're back in the old patterns completely, reacting the same way you always did. And that's fine, because this was never about stopping reactions. It was just about noticing that they're not the whole story. There's something here that doesn't react. Something that's present whether the reaction happens or not. And once you've felt that, even briefly, the landscape changes. Not dramatically, not all at once, just quietly. And you keep walking through it, not knowing what comes next, not needing to.